Again, for everyone who's watching, whether you're here in the hall or watching live or watching on our YouTube channel later. I'm Roger Struckoff. I'm the conference chair of Cloud Expo, and as I look at the graphic that those of you in the hall can see, you see two logos up there, Cloud Expo and DX World Expo. There should be a little arrow there because it's like this migration. So that's what we're going to talk about is digital transformation and kind of this how natural a migration or segue it might be between cloud and DX. So we have two panelists here. I know their names, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Chris and then Carl, introduce yourselves and then we'll get started. Go ahead.
Great. Well, great to be here and great to see you all. My name is Chris Kocher. I'm a co-founder of a consulting firm called Gray Heron, and we focus on working with high-tech companies on business and product strategies, primarily helping them grow revenues and looking at different monetization strategies.
Okay, come on up. Adi, we have another panelist. Grab a chair. Oh no, yeah, you don't have to do that work. We have people to do every task. We only have two mics, so you have to share. And Adi, you can introduce yourself once. Chris, Carl, and then we'll have Adi introduce himself, and then we'll formally start. Go on. Chris, go ahead, unless you're finished.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Carl.
Carl Zimmerman, founder, CEO of Steadfast. Had started this company 20 years ago as a shared web hosting business, and now we focus on private hybrid clouds for small and mid-sized businesses, where we go above and beyond in helping them with the people side of things. It's not just the infrastructure. No. Go for it. Thank you.
Works?
Good evening, folks. My name is Adi Sharma.
Good.
And I'm the founder and president of CrossCode. We started about 3 years back, a very young and a growing company, and we help organizations meet their transformation objectives by quickly uncovering and discovering the complexities that are holding them back. Thank you.
So my first question, and we'll start with Chris and then move on down. They all know how to behave.
This is great. I get to be first all the time here or what?
Well, no, then what we do is we double up and we come back this way. So he has to wait for number 3, but then he gets to be number 1. So it's a pretty cool system we have. It took me a long time to work it out, the algorithm. So Cloud Expo, DX World Expo. So should we just take the word term DX World and just move it over and wipe out cloud? Is that what's happening? Is cloud the same thing as digital transformation?
I guess I have a broader view on when I think of digital transformation. I think of it as changing businesses, and a lot of it being really people-focused and organization and process-focused. So it's not just digital. I think that's an important factor because a lot of times we overwhelmingly emphasize the technology, and a lot of times throwing hardware, software, services at a particular problem is not the real solution. So I think of it as broadly something that can be used in any kind of business, whereas I think of cloud maybe a little bit more narrowly as a technology capability to do processing on remote sites and all the business model changes and other attributes of it, but it's a little more specific. So
all right, Carl?
Well, I would largely agree. To me, the digital transformation side might utilize the technology of cloud and be based on cloud technologies and things like that. But digital transformation itself is, to me, the next level beyond that, where, at least to me, the idea is that the cloud will develop the setup and situation where you no longer need to worry about the underlying infrastructure, so the technology people can afford to take that next step, take those that next focus, and not really worry about the underlying technologies.
No, well, I completely agree with my fellow panelists here. In my opinion, the difference between cloud and digital is the what piece of the puzzle, and the cloud is the how piece of the puzzle. So digital is primarily enabling your new business capabilities in emerging times, following a totally different paradigm altogether, modernizing your existing applications and making them compatible to meet the demands of customers and your competitors in current times. And cloud is where the other side of the equation comes in. How do you enable this transformation? So that's my take.
So we'll let Adi start coming back. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear, by the way. This morning, I spoke at 8 o'clock, which seems it's already a piece of history. It's so long ago. It feels like about a year ago. And at the end, I talked about, the things, the big issues that face the economy and that face society. And without that vision and without thinking of people first, all the tools are of no use. But there are a lot of tools. So that's my question. If a company is imagining digital transformation, what does that mean? Is it something that can be done incrementally? Is it something that must require cloud computing? And even if so, is cloud computing just one of the many details involved with a true digital transformation? So the first part is, to me, the most important. Is it something you can do incrementally, and then how do you go about it?
Well, in my opinion, such a significant change as digital transformation always has to be done incrementally. I mean, history has taught us that whenever phenomenal changes are done in a big bang approach, chances of failure and risks, getting added into the equation are way, way, way too high. And such strategic objectives, you cannot, the appetite to undertake risks of such magnitude are very low. So to answer to the first part of your question, transformation strategy like digital transformation has to be done incrementally. You start slow, demonstrate success, and then you undertake the larger and the bigger goals associated with your strategy. Cloud, like you said, is, in my opinion, the strategic enabler for your digital transformation strategy. We are rapidly moving into the era of serverless computing, and in the digital transformation space, that, in my opinion, is a very critical component.
Carl?
Well, I'll say I sort of see the idea of digital transformation already as an incremental change, because to everyone, the entire point, at least the way I see running a business, is entirely based on how do you increase value and how do you increase efficiency. And really, in most cases, the digital transformation is just now, how do we take that to another level utilizing the technology we already have? So to me, it is in many cases of how, it is sort of an incremental change itself, but the way we've looked at IT in general up to this point has always been just a cost center. Never really looking at how that IT side of the business can accelerate things forward, how it can move things forward. I think, like you're looking at long-term strategic changes, a department doing something completely different than it did before and integrating into a business in ways it never integrated before. I don't think those are things that can happen overnight. That mentality, that whole idea, that's going to need to change incrementally. But I also think most of that change needs to definitely start from the top. If you don't have the buy-in from the top on what the new goals and the objectives are for the IT side, you're not going to see success in much of anything, and knowing then what the business objectives are for those things.
So I'm going to agree about 75 or 80% with you guys, and maybe a little disagreement off to the side, or an extension of what you're talking about. But I think to the extent that you can do things incrementally, obviously much safer. These can be very high-risk things, and the slow changes and testing is always nice if you can do that. I think one of the challenges that you were just bringing out, Carl, is that you have a real problem if you don't have upper level support. And I've actually seen a number of surveys on this. When you look at the success of some of these transformations, if you don't have buy-in from executives or line of business people, the failure rate is much, much higher. And so I think that's a critical factor. So the area where I would push the edge a little bit here is I think one of the challenges in transformation, I think of digital transformation not just being in the technology, but in the entire business. And one of the things that we see today is a situation where many businesses are looking at, tight labor markets, competition from China, Vietnam, whatever, all kinds of technology transitions. So a huge number of different factors that are beginning to hit companies, and they need to rethink their business. And so in some cases, it's who really is our customer? You know, what business are we in? Who do we partner with? What does our ecosystem look like? So these are broad questions. And the challenge, I think, is some companies and some businesses that get pulled into that kind of discussion, they can't make incremental changes too easily. They need to really rethink how they're incenting their sales teams, how the structure of the organization is going to affect what they do. Some very, very big questions, which are very tough and could also lead to greater failure, but something to be considered.
You know, when not that it's really of interest to anyone, but me and my family, I got sick about a year ago, and so I got to experience the medical system, and it was a very successful outcome. But along the way, there were some complications involving insurance, involving payments, involving a lot of aspects of the care, involving medications. And at the end of the day, so to speak, it was skilled professionals that actually did the real work to save me. And I was thinking, well, it worked, so I guess healthcare doesn't need to transform after all. I guess my point is there a circle to be squared when you talk about digital transformation in certain industries where the people are so essential that the talk of digital transformation just doesn't really hold up to the way it does for a company, for example, that doesn't want to get killed by Amazon? You know, are there completely different types of enterprises that maybe should resist, or am I way off going, no, Roger, the healthcare industry of all industries should be reformed? Chris, I gotta start with that very complicated, weird question.
So I think it's hard to be absolute to saying, you know, one industry or another should or shouldn't be. I think there's lots of opportunities within healthcare, whether it's through transformations in business models and the way things are priced and charged for. Certainly from a technology point of view, there's all kinds of things going on that could certainly help.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think there's opportunities not only in healthcare, but in many other sectors where you may choose from a business point of view not to automate something, not to digitize it, because the human touch is more important. So for instance, the interaction between a nurse and a person in some healthcare situation may be extremely important, or having the family involved in that setting where they can be supportive and be an advocate for somebody can be as important perhaps as some technologies.
It's already a very difficult experience for the patient. And so when the nurse comes in and sticks my finger endlessly all day long and jams needles into me, I think I'd rather have that than a machine doing it, even if you can prove the machine could do a better job, for example.
So you know, let me just respond. My wife is a doctor, and some of the times when I hear about things that go on, I'm absolutely shocked. And I've also had the chance to help out a few elderly people who are in hospitals in pretty acute situations. And I think one of the challenges of hospitals is they're, you know, obviously big organizations. They are trying to save people's lives and do good things, which is fantastic. The challenge is they're optimizing around very expensive equipment and very expensive hospitals and very expensive doctors. So the thing they are not most of the time is patient-centered. And so what would be great, and I think this is, unfortunately, it's almost impossible, is if you had somebody who said, let's go through a transformation and turn a hospital or healthcare into a patient-centered experience. And I think if you did that from a white, you know, pad of paper, you would have a completely different experience. I mean, you would not be like, for instance, if you've ever been in a critical care, you know, an ICU, to me, that's almost like torture. I've seen people in there and things are beeping all the time. There are lights on all the time. And as you were saying, people are pricking you with needles. And it's like people are literally getting into these things where they're not sleeping for 2 or 3 days and they're in critical care. It just makes no sense at all.
Well, they're trying to get you out of there. They're either going to kill you or get you out of there. Is there?
So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for rethinking what can be done. But I agree without the technology, there is a great opportunity there for personal touch.
And for Carl, I guess what I'm thinking is like edge cases or something, you know? Not only are they not all the same, but they're really not all the same.
Well, yeah, I would sort of go almost piggyback on the same thing. Is like I think all businesses can benefit in some way, but the key is how your own business defines and identifies that.
Yeah.
like, sort of the hand-holding thing. Like, I was just thinking internally inside our own company, the things we've been doing and focused on. Yeah, you focus on automation, efficiency, all those things. But for us, we decided to not do really any of that customer-facing. We still wanted us, our people, our experts, to be that interface with the customer. But then the objective being on sort of digital transformation side is make sure, though, we're giving those people as much information and resources as possible, that we're automating all of the other parts of their tasks so they can dedicate their time to doing more with those other people. So it isn't saying to use technology and take technology to, take over everything. It isn't the like, well, everyone now just interacts with a panel and that's how they interact with your business. It can also do the opposite, where you have now the same number of people, but they're able to dedicate their time doing those high value, high touch things. And that's sort of where I see the value, and I don't see any company that can't benefit from, sort of rethinking how they design their, internal policies and procedures to get their own people focused on where they can really add value, where they're adding the most value to the business. And technology, because technology can take over most of those other tasks that they shouldn't be doing or spending their time on.
Okay. Adi?
So in my opinion, digital transformation is a wave. It's a revolution that has already begun. It'll be very difficult to hold it back. I don't think so there would be any industry that can ignore itself from the phenomenal shift that has already begun, and industries will have no choice but to adopt digital transformation as a strategy. Over the past decade or so, we have seen these shifts emerging. Now, when it comes to computing, there are always two aspects associated with computing. One is the back-end side of computing, your servers, and where all the applications and processes exist. And we have seen that shift already moving to the cloud. And then the second aspect of computing is the front-end stuff, where the consumers, the users, they interact with the back-end applications, and that is where the shift has already begun towards digitization. I completely agree that there will be some industries where that human touch is definitely needed, like healthcare. You would rather feel more comfortable with a nurse, walking into your room and telling you what to do, what not to do, as opposed to a robot or a doctor from somewhere far in a different corner of the world, coming by a screen and telling you or working with you. So those middle paths will have to be will always exist. But in my opinion, there's hardly an industry that would be bereft or that can say that they don't want to embrace digital transformation in the full aspect.
Okay, and then Adi, we'll let you start this one. I have this question about maturity models and checklists. Is there a need? No, don't ask yes or no questions. How to what extent do you agree with the idea of a maturity model or checklist for a journey to digital transformation, and to what degree should we as an industry seek to make that a uniform process, even if it's a very complicated uniform process? So the question is really about maturity models and journeys to help companies on their journey. How important are they, and to what degree should they be uniform?
So I think and I'll answer it a little bit differently rather than focusing on uniform. I would say standardization. So with digital transformation, standardization will come in, but I feel standardization would not be across the board. Standardization would have to be driven and championed by different industries. So there will be different industries that will create their own models for digital transformation, and that is how companies and businesses will have to adopt. Now, to say that the model for retail when it comes to digital transformation would be the same for healthcare, the answer is probably no. So there would be variations, but the models and the standards for digital transformation would have to be industry specific.
Before you stop on that, like for example, with cloud computing, should we say that once you devoted a certain percentage of your workloads to a cloud, that is a benchmark that can be more or less the same for all industries, or is even something like that going to vary?
That, in my opinion, might happen. So once again, going back to the analogy of computing has got two components, the back end and the front end stuff. So the back end stuff is a little bit easier to handle. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, that is where you can drive certain metrics and you can drive certain standardizations that could be consistent across different industries. But it is the front end, part and the data elements where the digital transformation would have to be
I see.
driven by certain industry standards.
Carl, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I definitely see needed for more and increased standardization on the specific technologies and technology platforms, but as far as a company's overall plan, I don't really, you can come up with guidelines, but I don't know that you can really come up with a set plan because, at least to me, there are enough differences between every company. Even if you're in the same industry, you might operate in a completely different way. So even to say set like a percentage, to me gets very difficult, especially too, since especially in those broad ways or broad senses, two companies can hit that same metric by doing it in completely different ways. So I don't know, like to me, as a business founder and owner myself is also too, I don't like being told what to do or how to do things.
Right.
That I'd
There's that
rather
problem.
find it out inside my own business and be able to start, have that maybe broad
Who
framework
says?
of here are the things to think about, here are the things,
Yeah.
here are the primary objectives. Make sure you have these primary objectives set, and here should be your goals at these certain areas or certain steps. Would possibly, at least to me, sound better than a checklist.
I think, everybody likes to have the idea of a checklist and you just go down, you do it in a template and it's done and that's great. I think it's tough to do. Let me ask a question, or I'll answer this question, which is, why do digital transformation?
Right.
Who cares, right? So how you answer that question may depend on this. So I think if you look at it, there's sort of two broad categories. One is, okay, I'm going to streamline my operations. I'm going to improve the efficiency. I'm going to, reduce costs. I'm going to reduce inventory. There's a lot of internal things, and those are all great. And by the way, I think those, within certain industries, you might have a very similar transformation in those. The other side is, I want to improve the customer experience. I want to increase revenues. I want to get into new markets. And that sort of outbound aspect of new ways to create your business may be very different from one business to the next. And even within one industry, you may find it's pretty different. So for example, let's take technology companies. Let's say you're Dell and Cisco. So you're saying, okay, these are two tech companies. They sell all kinds of technology, some overlap there. And if you start saying on the outbound side, so how am I going to improve customer experience and grow my revenues and so forth? What do I look at? Well, a company like Cisco is very reliant on their channel partners, and they've got thousands of those guys. So that, in some respects, is very much the kind of thing they need to optimize around. So the things they do for those channel partners may be very different than another company. I'm sort of thinking of Dell in the old days when they were selling computers direct. So even though they're both selling technology, one's selling networking technologies to a channel, the other is selling PCs to direct. Very different marketing, very different outbound, different revenues, streams potentially, and different experiences that they want to create. So that, I think, would be very hard to templatize.
Well, how do you keep it from just being window dressing? The buy-in does need to come from the top. I think we would all agree with that. And if there's no real objective standards or criterion or roadblocks or maturity models, that leaves a lot of the vendors to find it in their own terms. But if it's really difficult to pin down tangible proof that you're doing digital transformation, how do you keep that term from just being window dressing or hand waving? A nice statement in the annual report if you're a public company, but you're not really committed to fundamentally changing anything. It seems to me it can be very squishy in how really to define it in a tangible way, digital transformation.
Let me see if I can make this a little briefer here, but
Yeah.
I think the key is, again, sort of why are you doing it? And there's no reason to do it if it's not furthering your business objectives.
But how do you get people to give an honest answer to why we're doing it other than to maintain competitive advantage? You got to measure it somehow.
Okay, but I think
Yeah.
the place I would start is with the leadership. So whether it's the CEO himself or business unit managers or whatever, say we need to change our business, transform because of some reason, competitive or improving margins or profitability or share, some reasons, and competitive, serious competitive challenges. based on that, we're going to need to do these kinds of things. So let's ask ourselves the tough questions about what we need to do differently. Now, the leader is not going to necessarily answer it, but he can then say, these are the objectives of what we need to do in a digital transformation. And then, basically put the oomph behind creating the teams and the budgets and everything to actually have them go out and figure that stuff out. But my feeling is that if you just do something that's completely organic, it can be problematic because people go off and you're in different silos with different views and incentives.
Yeah.
So,
Carl, what do you think?
Well, I'll say I find it odd that we want to very, very clearly define that when the other component is Cloud Expo, where the term cloud, if we asked everyone in the room, probably everyone has a different definition of that as well.
Right.
So it's like, to me, like, why the need to strictly define it sort of in that way? I do agree, to me, it has to be probably most of the people saying they're doing digital transformation, they really haven't done or changed anything. So to me, you see it more from their actions than just listening and seeing what they're saying. If they've not done anything in their business, well, I always see there always seems to be so much focused on sort of the efficiency and sort of cost saving side of things. But to me, that's almost like the easy approach. To me, it's like I'll believe it when I see companies really using the technology to improve the customer experience, to build and expand their business, to build and drive revenue. That's when I'll start believing that they're actually, that they're actually doing something transformative. And then those are the things that you can just see. Those are the things you can see and feel in a company, and then you can believe them. If they're simply using technology and saying, we're using technology to make ourselves run more efficiently, isn't that what every business has been doing for 100 plus years, using technology to run more efficiently? So, yeah.
Can't get squishy. Adi, I'm gonna stop you before you start. Then I'm gonna let you start because I'm anticipating you saying, well, at the back end you can do it because there are some things that are easier to measure than others. And how would you measure things, or do you need to measure everything? And if so, how do you measure things that are more difficult to measure? It's like, I'm just imagining hearing the back end, which is a very good insight. And
Sure.
Correct, but how do you go beyond that?
Sure. So there are two things, in my opinion, which are associated with it. First is, I just want to take a step back and want to fully agree with my co-panelists here that digital transformation is actually, in my opinion, the enabler for new capabilities and new business metrics and new business processes that you want to introduce into your enterprise. How do you optimize certain processes better? How you control costs better? How you reach out to your customers more effectively? How you control inventory a lot more efficiently. Now, these aspects can very easily be enabled using digital transformation, but the key is, just like any other business capability, you have to define certain metrics and how you want to measure success. Mm-hmm. And that is where standardization would creep in, but that standardization would be very pertinent to certain industries. That, in my opinion, is something which has not been accomplished today, but would be a focus area, for the years to come, as more and more industries are embracing digital transformation as a key strategy and the key enabler to enable their new business models. They will have to start putting together some forums. They will have to start putting together some thought leadership into establishing those metrics on how to measure success around each of those key areas.
Okay, so I'll let you start on this question. We'll spend a little time, and I think we're going to run out of time, about the idea. So now you're a consultant, or you're a true guru, and you've been brought in by a big company, and they tell you all of the things that are wrong. We got this problem, we got that problem, this isn't working, that isn't working. And you filter through the complaints they're making that are irrelevant, and you see a lot of problems they have, but they've never used the term digital transformation. How would you convince them, saying, look, you're looking at things bit by bit, little point solutions, for lack for a better term. How do you convince people you really got to see the big view? How do you do that?
Right. So, in my opinion, the starting point is, of course, you have to start with the problems, what is working and what is not working. And once you have identified, which in my opinion is, a very good thing if, one of your customers tell you that this is where I'm struggling, this is what my, pain points are, this is what is not working, for me. That means there is an acknowledgement of something, not going right. As a consultant, I have to see and I have to map it back to what the winners in the industry are doing. So if you are operating in the same space, that is, pick example, retail. So you are struggling in certain areas in retail, but there are leaders in the space too who have embraced new models and who are doing a phenomenal job, in that space. That is how, in my opinion, the starting point would be to map out the areas where they are not executing, map out the areas where, which are clearly a pain point for them, and map it back to the successes or map it back to things that the leaders in the same space are doing right. Not to say that you want to, get into a Me Too kind of a battle there and you want to replicate the successes of one player, over the other, but at least that is a starting point. And if that starting point, comes out to be, well, heck, the champion in this space is using digital transformation and digital strategies a lot more effectively to reach out to their customers, whereas, my current client has not embraced these, new models to reach out to their, customers better. At least, we have a starting point. So it is very important to establish those baselines before we start on embarking the journey of digital transformation and just picking things up and changing them on the fly.
The problem with my system is Carl never gets to go first, but the advantage is you get to listen to someone first.
I'm
and
good
then
with that.
respond. So, it's like, I guess I did you a favor, but how would you go about this? So the company has all these problems. They haven't even thought of the term, and they're not really the kind of company that would normally do something that they perceive as, too advanced or something. How do you convince them that what they really need? You have one enlightened person on the management team, and you want to reach that person.
Yeah, I'll say, we're generally getting involved after they've already made the original decision, not getting in on the very early consulting side. So try to think through of haven't really dealt with that situation. I'm almost thinking in my head of if they don't realize they need to use technology to solve some of these problems and thus need to change it internally, is almost just let them go out of business. But that's probably, but that's, if you're a consultant and brought in, that's probably not going to make you much money to go about it that way.
Right.
But to me, I mean, it really is sort of almost that clear, though, to not realize that there's technologies out there that can assist you and help with a number of problems and a number of issues. I guess where I see that correlating is seeing so many companies that with their IT budget, with their IT spend, are sort of already on we barely get anything out of this now. Things are barely running as they are. Why would we put more money towards IT and technology? And the thought is the reason nothing runs as it should is because you're not spending the time and money on it. That a company like ours, where we can help and say all these IT people that are spending 80% of their time just making sure everything is running, their job is just to make sure things stay the status quo. How are they going to really add value to your business? It really is sort of taking that step back and making sure that everyone, as many people as possible, are able to add that value to the business. They're not just there running and maintaining. Anyone can run and maintain. Push that off on a company like us. Let them focus and do what they do. And just imagine now that you have this additional manpower, you have this additional, expertise and insight into these ideas. How many problems is that going to fix? That is going to be a huge change sort of throughout the company on that idea. And I don't know. More people at it are going to fix it. I don't know what I'm saying right now.
No, it's a difficult problem because again, with the term, I think can cause if someone's not predisposed to think that way, it can be difficult to get them to think that way. Go ahead, Chris.
So I'll agree with Adi. So I think the idea of benchmarking is always good. Get a sense of what's going on. What are the best practices? That always is a great thing to do. I think it's a challenge if you have a complete laundry list of all kinds of problems and issues, then using judgment and other techniques, really try and prioritize it and get the client to buy into these are the big ones, these 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it is. Let's hold off another 20 till a later time. Mm-hmm. And then I think another thing, even barring that, you need to use your own judgment and say, okay, you're talking about these things, but I think part of this is these 2 or 3 other things that you may not be thinking of. So hopefully you bring something to the table. But another approach I think that works very well is if you look at a company and the CEO or the chairman or whatever has, here are our 3 strategic objectives for the year. We have got to reduce churn or something, or improve customer satisfaction, or whatever their particular things are. Then you can take that and sort of work backwards from it into, well, what does that really mean? How can we initiate some digital transformation initiatives which will help achieve those goals? And I think getting back to another question you had earlier about things are pretty squishy and measuring them. If you take the example of, let's say a company is losing a lot of customers, there's very high churn. So one of the things you might say is, this is a problem we've got to fix because we're spending a fortune on marketing, we're churning customers, we cannot continue like this, we're not competitive. So what are we going to do? So you may identify, a handful of things, including customer experience. And if that's the case, then maybe you're working with a support organization and trying to deliver, very specific things. How can we transform our support organization or our customer success? And how are we going to measure that? And the measurements may be, okay, we need to improve our net promoter score by 20%. We need to make sure that, 37% of calls are answered on the, not the first ring, but resolved in the first call.
Right.
And we need to make sure, and this is one of my favorites whenever I call Comcast or somebody else, it's like, you fill in all the information for them and, give them your numbers and everything else. And then the first question you get from the person who answers the phone is, and what's this number, and what's your account number, and you're telling them the same thing. It's like, shut that system off if it doesn't work. So make sure the systems are actually working the way they're supposed to. And I think part of the reason that a lot of things don't work, it's not that the technology is broken, it's that they're not implemented properly. And that's the process things that have not been in place. So anyway, that's my...
Well, that's the thing. It's the not knowing that you have the problem. You know that this is a problem, but maybe you can't see that you're not looking at it from a high enough point of view. And actually, to be honest, sometimes you do have to give up. Not every company is going to be amenable to, is going to want to do what you want them to do. The last few minutes, especially for everyone who's watching us live and is going to be watching later, if the three panelists could again tell the camera who you are and how they can contact you in case they really want to learn more and go down this road and want to talk to you about it.
Okay, so again, my name is Chris Kocher. My company's name is Gray Heron. We're a consulting business, and if you have issues around how you're going to grow your business, get into new markets, help figure out how to monetize things, we'd love to talk to you. You can reach me through email, which is kocher@grayheron.com. What I'd suggest is you look up the speaker bio
And you'll
on the
find
conference thing. You'll find all the details. You'll find my background and other contact information. So I'll be passing it on to the rest of you.
And I'm Carl Zimmerman, founder CEO of Steadfast. Steadfast, we are an infrastructure provider, sort of compete in the cloud space with the big players, but where we differentiate is the providing the people, providing the expertise. So the whole idea is that you can use the cloud as the baseline for your digital transformation, so you can have your people focused on the things that are really going to add value, and we can focus on the how you do that. As opposed to the why or the next steps after that. And you can reach me. I'm not going to go with the cell phone number route, but email Carl@steadfast.net. It's Carl with a K. If you spell it with a C, I'll probably still get it. And then otherwise, information, everything on our site, steadfast.net, or in the bios.
Folks, my name is Adi Sharma, and I'm the founder and president for CrossCode Incorporated. CrossCode is industry's first truly automated enterprise dependency mapping platform, which basically helps you understand the complexities of your enterprise architecture, maps down every application, every database in your enterprise down to the code levels for applications and database field levels for databases, and creates these powerful dependency maps, which lets you complete your transformation strategies a lot quicker, a lot faster, and also eliminate all the business and IT risks out of the equation. Our customers have gone on record to say that using CrossCode, they have been able to successfully accomplish their mission-critical objectives in upwards of, with more than 40% of time and cost savings. You can check us out at www.crosscode.com. If you want to reach me, you can either go to the contact us page on our website and reach out to us directly there. You can also email me directly at asharma, that's ASHARMA @crosscode.com. Thank you.
And I'm Roger Struckoff, Conference Chair at Cloud Expo. And actually what I was doing here was getting a lot of free advice. So now I know as we continue to build this program, we're going to stick with the Cloud Expo. because it's not the same thing as DX World. But there is a measure of them being complementary. But there's a lot more involved, and we need to have a lot more material, I think, that addresses this digital transformation, because the term is not going to go away. It's going to stay with us, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. Cloud and the related technologies are going to play a role, but not the only role. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.